Welcome to our next project. Now we are going to build a router. What is the problem that we are going to solve? Let me show you. Let's go to our browser. In our browser, at the moment when we want to go to another page, we write, for example, index.php, contact.php, home, pricing, everything has this .php at the end. Today we want to remove that. We want to make our URL a bit more beautiful. So right now at the moment, if I go to index.php, it works. There is no error. But if I go to index, it doesn't know what to do, and server says that I do not recognize this file, I do not have such file, and I don't know what to do. Today we are going to build a router and tell the server what to do. The very first thing that we need to do is to redirect everything to one file. In our case, index.php file. This is not part of the problem that we are going to solve. The very first thing we need to do is to create a .htaccess file and copy this inside that. Let's create htaccess file, and inside this .htaccess file, I copy everything here. Now our server knows that, okay, rewrite engine on and rewrite base is this. Rewrite everything to index.php. Now everything that we pass the URL, our server is going to redirect to index.php, and index.php is going to handle that. In this htaccess file, we are redirecting everything to our index.php. If it was on the server, it would be okay. But since we are using a local web server, and you might have a folder like me, like PHP course, I have PHP course, so I cannot send it to the main path. Like at the moment in this file, it sends local host, and everything after this would go back to localhost index.php file and expect index.php file to handle this. But in our case, I want to handle everything that comes after PHP course to index.php file in this main directory. So my main directory would be PHP course, not the path up there. So in your case, I do not know what the name of your folder structure and your directory is. That's why I left it empty. So please make sure to add this at the end of your rewrite base and the path. For example, right now, if your directory name was something like my site, then you should pass my site here. And then everything that goes after this will go to index.php, and index.php will handle that. In my case, as I said, my directory name is PHP course, so I'm going to specify that here. So now my local web server is going to send everything that comes after this PHP course to index.php file inside this folder, index.php. Otherwise, if it was something else like API or my site, it would go to that directory and try to handle it that way. So be careful with that, and let's go to the solution. So make sure to change it in your project, and this htaccess file should be in the main directory. Okay, this was not part of the problem. This is something I gave you to just get started. Our solution should be a class, a router class. This router class would have a function that would get the method and the path and the file that needs to be returned. So here we would be writing something like router, and I don't know, handle the method. For example, it would be get, and if we are in index.php, in index, then record the file index.php. Okay, something like this. This or something like this should be the end result. So pause the video, try to find the solution yourself, and come back to see what would be my solution. Okay, are you ready? Let's get started. At the moment, as I said, everything is redirected to index.php. So if I use my server super global and get the requested URI, I can echo that to see what we'll get and to see if we are here. I do not have any other file, as you see, it's just one index.php file. So let's go to my browser, search for anything up here like contact. It would bring me to index.php. It's not going to give me an error saying that I didn't find this file. If I go to anything here, it's going to be redirected to index.php, and our index.php is going to handle this file. So now let's build our router. So our index.php would send the user to the corresponding page. Let's go to index.php and comment this out. The very first thing I want to do is to create the class. So I'm going to create the class router, new PHP class router. Okay. And this router is going to have a public function called handle. Inside this function, I'm going to do everything. The very first argument that this function gets is the method. Is it, for example, get or post? And by default, I want it to be get. Then after that, I'm going to get the path. So I'm going to get the path that I'm going to match. And by default, it would be this as the root directory. And the last one is file name. There is no default for this. So now I expect my index.php or any other file that is using this class to run this handle function, pass 3 arguments. The first argument is the method, the second argument is the path, the last argument is the file name that we need to require if the path was correct. But at the moment, if I go to index.php and I want to use this class, I have to create an object like router equals to new router, and then use it like router handle. But I do not want that. I want to be able to write something like this directly without creating an object and then run handle. In order to do that, we have to make it static. So it's a public static function. And if I write it again, I do not get any errors because this is a static and it's completely fine to call the method like this. And because I have already set some default values for my arguments, this is not going to give me an error. This is going to go here, and let me see if we are here, echo we are in the handle method. Everything should be redirected to index.php, and index.php is going to call this, and here we are going to echo this. So let's go to our browser, refresh the page. It's giving me an error, class router not found. That's because we have not required the file in our index.php. Let's require it once, require once router.php, and let's go back to the browser. And we are in the handle method. Perfect, everything works fine now. Let's go back to index.php. Now I want to handle get, and then I want to check if it's contact, and then if it is contact, I want to open contact.php. So first let's create contact.php, new PHP file contact, and inside this let's say echo I am in contact.php file to make sure that everything works. At the moment we haven't done anything, but we are going to start writing the code, and later we could add other methods. For example, if it was post and it was to contact, it's probably the form is going to be handled, so I'm going to include handle.php or something like that. If it was pricing, I'm going to do something else, but for now let's start with get contact, and then we will add more routes to our index.php. Now let's go to handle and see what we can do. Okay, at the moment I want to get the current method and current URI of what user has requested, so I would be able to check if this is the same method and if it's the same path. So I could include the file, and I can get the current request method and URI from this super global variable server. So let's print that out to see what I'm going to get. Print R, because it's an array, so I'm going to use print R, and let's go to browser to see what we'll get. let me open this view page source because it would show it cleaner. What I want is request URI and method. The request method is this one, which is get here, and request URI is this one, PHP course, and this path, exactly this path. So let's store them in two variables and check if we are in the correct path. Let's comment that out and let's say current method equals to server request method, and the current URI is server request URI. Okay, perfect. Now the very first thing is to check if current method is not equal to the method that is specified up there. Return false. We do not want to continue running the code. Okay. If we get here, it means that the method is correct and we are now going to check the path. We want to check the path with preg match. So I'm going to use preg match. If our pattern is the same as current method, current URI, then we are going to require once the file name. Otherwise, we want to return false and do nothing. But here, let me put that in if condition. Okay, if preg match and one more. Okay, if this preg match doesn't find any match from this URI against this pattern, we are going to come here and return false. Otherwise, we are going to require the file. So what is my pattern? Well, we are going to create a regex pattern that checks for exact match of that path. At the moment, the path is something like contact. Like as you can see in index.php, we have passed contact. Here, we check if it's contact. And how can we write the regex? Nobody can really memorize regex. So let's go to regex 101 and build our pattern there. Let's go to regex101.com. Here I'm passing something like contact and I want it to be exact match. I want it to start with the word and end there. I want to check for contact. At the moment we have these slashes. We can escape the slash or we can change the delimiter completely so we wouldn't have to escape the slashes. So right now slash would be considered as part of the pattern. No problem, that's great. But right now if I pass something like contact, it's not going to match, and if it's multi-line it's going to be match again. I do not want that, so let's take care of it. I don't want it to be global. I want it to return after the first match. If it is a match, then just return. I don't want it to be multi-line. I want it to be a single line. I want it to be insensitive to case. Perfect. And I wanted to check for $sign only for end of the pattern. Perfect. So it would add something like SID. At the moment, if I have contact, it's going to be still match because we checked for exact match. This is not going to be matched. And contact. Okay, perfect. If I have multi-line, it's not going to match that. Perfect. So let's copy this and go back to our code. So my pattern would be something like this, but instead of this contact I'm going to pass this path. Because we use this for delimiters, we do not need to escape the slashes, but if you wanted to use slashes, then you have to use a function like add slashes to escape all those slashes in your path to make sure that wouldn't affect the pattern itself. So let's change it back to this. Right now, this pattern is going to check if contact is the same as PHP course contact. And of course, it's going to return false. It's not going to find any match because I said exact match. I used start and end. So this is not going to be match and we are going to come here. So what should we do? Because if it was in the root directory of the server, no problem. It wouldn't cause any issues. It's going to match contact against contact. So it would definitely be a match and we would come here. But because our root directory is different, which is PHP course, let's add that root directory to our pattern. So root would be this. And we want to add this root to this path. Now we are checking for PHP course contact, but because the root directory is exactly the same, we are not going to include it here, so I wouldn't have to write PHP course every time. If your directory is different, then choose a different directory. If I wanted to make this method more general, so I could use it in all of my projects, I wouldn't hardcode PHP course here. I would add some directory here to check for the root directory and then pass it like that. So I wouldn't have to come here and change my method every time. But for the sake of this tutorial, let's hardcode this root directory here. Now, at the moment, there is one more issue. If I have something like echo, I'm in the contact.php file. Let's echo something here, echo in index.php file, and let's build another path like pricing. And let's say if it was in pricing, I want to check pricing.php. And let's say in my router, I want to echo the path that has been passed because I want to show you something. Right now, if we run the code, it's going to require this file, but let's see if we get all these echoes as well. Let's go to the browser. Let's go to localhost and run the code again. At the moment, it says, okay, this is the path contact, and then this is the path pricing, and then it echoes that we are in index.php file. So it has gone through this file. It came here, it went there and echoed this and didn't find anything. It didn't require the file. It went back here, it went through this, it ran this again, pricing, and didn't find a match again. It went back here and echoed this. But what if we had a match? Now let's go back to the browser and let's go to contact. It's going to echo that. It's going to echo that I'm in contact.php file, but it is still is going to continue running the code. I'm in pricing, index.php file, everything. So how can we stop that? If there is a match, I don't want it to go through the other paths and other files. So let's go back to the code and find a solution. Okay, right now here, if we find a match, we just require the file and then we continue running the code. What can we do here? We can add this function exit. Exit is a PHP function that causes the whole running the script to end. If we run exit, it's not going to continue and it's going to come here, check for this contact. If there is a match, it comes here, includes the file, and then exit running the code. And it's not going to run this part, it's not going to run this part. So let's see if it works. Let's go back to our browser and run some other code. It's not going to exit the script because contact, pricing, and index.php file. But if I run contact again, it's going to run this contact and sees that, hey, there is a match, and then runs the file, requires the file, and exit the code. So now we do not have pricing, we do not have index.php file. So perfect, this is perfect. Let's go back to our code and remove all these echoes. Okay, now this path is cleaner. We can add another path to see if it works. Pricing. Let me create another file, new PHP file, pricing. And now inside this pricing, I'm gonna echo I am in the pricing.php file. Let's see if it works. Let's go to index.php. Let's handle get contact and handle get pricing. The moment of truth. Let's go to the file. Let's go to contact. We are in contact page. And if we run pricing, we are in pricing page. And if we run something else, we would be in index.php. We can throw some 404 errors or something that I couldn't find it, or we can specify a default file, default function that handles all these files that are not known. So our router for now is finished. Perfect. So we built a very simple router. We can use that in our files, and now we would be having beautiful URL. So instead of having a file like example.com contact us.php, we would have just contact us. We would have just pricing instead of pricing.php. Isn't that amazing? With just less than 10-20 line of code, we could do that with PHP easily. This is the end of the project. Let's continue with our course.